as I was getting older throughout my late 20s, I would see just a lot of my girlfriends and women in my life going through all these crazy things, and it was just really helpful for me when I was going through experiences to lean on my friends for support, and I realized how precious and valuable that was. But then when I looked at the media, there wasn't a lot of that kind of content promoted for women. It was the complete opposite, like be superficial, tear each other down, and pick on each other's appearances. But in real life, we needed each other. So I'm like, I feel like there's a disconnect, and there needs to be some crossover where women who look at media every day, which is all of us, we need to be able to find some sort of inspiration in that as well. So that was like my personal reason for wanting to start and focus on women especially. I'm Asha Dyer from GirlTalkHQ.com. My passion is to inspire my generation of women by presenting positive media content. I actually went through a divorce a couple of years ago, and although I had friends who had been in similar situations and other crazy life experiences, when I went through it, I realized how much I needed my girlfriends, and especially because my family is so far away, they're in Australia, and having that support group. And there were men in my life too who were very supportive, but especially women who could identify with me as a woman. That was really awesome for me, and so that kind of made me realize, it made me rethink, what am I doing with my career? Where do I want to go? What's my focus? What am I passionate about? And I guess that was the culmination of where I am today. In 2012, I was hosting a daily trending news show on MSN. So I was doing that most of the year, and I had started my Tumblr blog at that point, and I was still working on it on the side. So while I was working on MSN, I would be blogging on the side, and that's when my passion started to ignite, and that's also when I was going through this divorce. So kind of three things happened at the same time. But then when that job ended, when my contract ended there, I thought to myself, well, when I was in between jobs, maybe I'll just use this time to start a website and to launch it and just to see what happens. And let's just kind of step it up a notch. Instead of just being a free Tumblr site, let's kind of present it in a way that I'd want it to be a professional media site. And then it just kind of built from there, and I started spending more and more time and finding different ways to improve it. So that's kind of the transition going from my previous job to doing this more full-time. The struggles that I faced, well, definitely learning little techie things that I didn't really know, but then I was able to figure them out and find help along the way. But the biggest struggles have been finding my voice in a sea of so many online. Like, there are so many different brands and blogs and people blogging about women's issues and so many other pop culture issues online. So it was about me finding why I'm different and how do I separate myself from the rest. And I guess growing a readership and growing a social media following is tough, because you see all these bigger websites and bloggers out there, and they have this huge following. And at first it was really daunting and overwhelming, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. But I'd only just started, so once I did a little bit more research, I realized that a lot of these big bloggers have been doing it for like 6 to 8 years. So it takes a while to build up following, and I realized that I can't just be daunted by everything that's out there. I just have to equip myself. So I guess that's kind of how I overcame a lot of those struggles of inadequacy and feeling intimidated by other brands that are out there. Colby Calais just released this music video called Try, and it was all about women just being themselves, not trying to be someone else. And in the video you see women wiping off their makeup, taking off their wigs and hair extensions, and just being without all the superficiality. And I feel like there's definitely a movement in the media where women are sick of being told by advertisers, by the diet industry, by the fashion industry, like, hey, you've got to be a size 0, and you've got to be white, and you've got to be blonde to be successful, beautiful, popular, all those other kind of things. Like the kind of women represented in fashion advertising is 5% of women. So the other 95% are like, well, hey, what about us? So I feel like collectively online through social media, blogs, and a lot of celebrities, we're all raising our voices and saying, hey, we're real too, and we're beautiful, and it should be about celebrating all of us individually rather than dictating what we should look like. Mm-hmm. So being part of a photo shoot a friend of mine who I actually became friends with through a makeup artist friend of mine. She's a photographer and she has a clothing label called Dame Life, and it celebrates women being fit and healthy in their own bodies. She is doing this beauty series called Raw Beauty, and she wants to photograph and interview women about what makes them special, what do they like about themselves, and once it's released, I think it's just going to be another powerful voice to add to all of the others. And I really like being part of it just because I want to have my voice part of that. That's the main thing. I just want to use my voice in whatever way possible. So my grandmother was she was so fiercely proud of being Punjabi and being Indian, and she never made it a gender issue. She was 16 when she got married. She had 6 kids. She moved from India to Africa when she was a little girl, and having a young family and being married as a teenager. From Africa, she moved then to England when her and my granddad migrated in the 60s, I believe it was. So she went through a lot of cultural upheavals and struggles, moving to a white country, being an Indian, where all of a sudden there was all these issues of race and socioeconomic background. Like there was all these tensions in England in the 60s because all these Indians moved in. So, but what I got from her, and she was very strong and stubborn and strong-willed, because of what she'd been through, she didn't want us to lose our identity, because I've never been to India and I didn't have the same upbringing that she did. So my upbringing was mainly Western. So for her, being like the matriarch of the family, she wanted us never to forget where we came from and never to forget our identity. As a teenager growing up in Australia, I really couldn't give a rat's about being Indian. In fact, I hated it. Like, I was embarrassed about it. I mean, Australia is very multicultural and there were so many different ethnicities, but for me, I just didn't want to be brown. I didn't want to have an Indian name. I just wanted to be white. And now I think, it's so offensive to think that I hated my own identity so much. So I'm really glad that even though I didn't like it at the time, my parents and my extended family really enjoyed being who they were and celebrated their own identity, and that really had an impact on me. That was really powerful for me, and that's something that I hope I can show other women that look at this site, that it's, whoever you are is to be celebrated and should be embraced. You know, don't try and be anyone else. So feminism to me used to be such a foreign concept. I thought it was these highbrow academic women who never wore makeup and was super intellectual, didn't really like men, and it was just something out there that didn't apply to me at all. But now that I've been doing my website and being engaged in just a really awesome community of like-minded women in Los Angeles in all different industries, I've really come to know what feminism means and how it's relevant to my life. And I found the definition, which I never knew before, which is basically the social, political, and economic equality of both genders. And I know that not all feminists probably stand for that. And I think that there have been a few radicals and extremists, like in any movement or religion, that give all the others in that movement a bad name. But all the feminists that I know, we're all about supporting each other as women. It's not about hating men. It's not about not shaving your legs. It's not about just fighting for reproductive rights. Like, I blog about body image and positivity and promoting positive role models in the media. Those things are traditionally not seen as feminist issues. Usually if you're a feminist, you have to be extremely liberal and you have to think like this and you can't be a stay-at-home mom, and all those things are just not what feminism is about. And for me, I believe feminism is supporting each other in whatever choice you make, because if you're a stay-at-home mom, as long as you've chosen to do that, power to you, and there's no reason why I shouldn't support you. You know, just the same as me, if I choose to be an entrepreneur and I don't necessarily agree with the things you agree with, that doesn't mean we can't be friends, support each other, and, you know, encourage each other as a community of women. And I definitely think men can be part of that conversation, because there are gender barriers out there. I mean, there's definitely things like a wage gap in certain industries, in certain areas. There's definitely sexism and misogyny that exists out there, and you know, women come up against it all the time, and some don't experience it, and that's totally fine. But there's definitely different things that we're fighting for I wouldn't even use the word fight. There are things that feminists stand for today that women in the 1920s didn't. So we've definitely progressed a long way. I would encourage all women out there that I think it's definitely necessary for them to have is find your passion. And that doesn't mean your career has to be a passion. It can be a lifestyle, it can be a hobby, it can be just something, but live your life with passion in it because it'll be so much more satisfying. Find your identity, because I feel like there's so many things out there that are threatening to hijack our identities, whether it be the media or family or peer pressure, things like that. If we know our own identity and we know how we value ourselves, the stronger we are, and we're not so swayed by the tides and the trends. So finding your identity, finding your value, defining that yourself is very, very important, and it's just such a great tool to have. Find a good group of girlfriends, whether it's 1 or 2 or whether it's 10, just find a group of friends that you can be completely open, honest, and vulnerable with, because you want someone you can share your life with, someone that can lean on you in the hard times and vice versa. And it's just such a valuable thing to have, because when you're going through something tough, you want someone you can lean on. If you're trying to start a business or if you're coming up with a new idea, you want to be able to bounce those ideas off someone else and get feedback. And there's so many valuable things about having a group of girlfriends that I found have enriched my life and my career and my personal relationships in so many other ways. So that's something I highly encourage for everyone.